My name is Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our mission is to improve the workplace by increasing transparency, and we offer a variety of free resources like anonymous company reviews, job listings, articles, virtual recruiting events, and so much more to help women succeed in their careers. Before we start off, we will be recording today's webinar and sending it out in a follow-up email. So if you miss anything or you want to rewatch it back at any time, you'll have the ability to do so. We'll also be taking some questions at the end of the webinar, so use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screens. You can leave questions as yourself or anonymously, so feel free to ask anything that comes to mind. Here with me today is Lindsay Gordon. Lindsay is a career coach for analytically minded people who want to stop doing what they think is right in their career and start doing what's right for them. Through her business, A Life of Options, she helps people get clarity about what's right for them in a job and why confident about their skills and abilities, and able to communicate that to interviewers, managers, and colleagues. Thanks for being here today, Lindsay. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Super excited to chat about how to design a career that fits, something that I'm very passionate about. And I will let you know that we're going to do a couple of exercises. There will be a couple of writing prompts. So if you want to go and grab paper and pen, otherwise computer is fine. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So we have this really sneaky assumption that successful people always knew what they wanted to do. When we see somebody who is having success, who has found their calling, who is great at what they do, we put them up on this pedestal and think, wow, that's so incredible. Look at what they've been able to accomplish. And at the same time, a sneaky voice can often pop up and say, well, I'll never be like them because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't even have a 1-year plan. I don't even know what I'm doing next week. So there's a great book called The Art of Work, and they talk about it as, for the longest time, I believed a little lie about people who were fulfilling their purpose, and it prevented me from finding my own calling. One simple phrase, you just know. When we find someone doing what they love for a living, we tell ourselves a story. The problem is that it isn't true. So when I talk to people about my path so far, I worked at Google for many years, and then I started my own career coaching business. And so often when I tell this story, I get the same response. People's eyes glaze over and they get this really big smile on their face and say, oh my gosh, how cool that you just quit and did your passion. And I gotta tell you, I hate that version of the story because it doesn't include all of the ups and the downs and the things that I fell into and the serendipity and the not knowing if this was the right next step and the discovering things that I had no idea about. And so while it would be easy for me to go around saying like, yep, I just quit and did my passion, I like to tell the real story so that we can all start to have conversations about what it actually looks like to find a career that fits for you. So the real story is that I'm an engineer who fell into technical support, who then completely fell into career development with an accidental side business that became full-time only after I tested the idea for a year. And I also take professional baking classes because I kind of want to be a baker. So nothing about that should say, oh, I just knew. I knew that this was exactly where I was going to be, that I was going to be running my own business. Not at all. I fell into every career transition that I have made so far. So there was no plan, but they acted anyway. They didn't just know, they chose. And that's what I want you to get out of today, is that you don't necessarily need to have a grand plan, but I want you to have some of the tools and the frameworks and the decision-making strategies for how to choose how to design your career. So I've been working with people for several years now, and I have found that employees are really anxious and dissatisfied with where they are. Now, why are employees struggling? I've boiled it down into 3 categories from all the work that I've done with clients. One is a lack of clarity. people don't know what they're looking for. Nobody teaches us how to know what's important to us and what we're looking for in a job. And some of you, whether you're employees or managers, may have asked someone the question, well, what do you want to do? Or had that asked to you, and you have no idea how to answer that question. And so it leaves you feeling even more aimless and disorganized and maybe embarrassed that you can't answer that. The second is a lack of confidence in their decisions. People spend so much time and energy waffling on decisions, regretting, second guessing, beating themselves up about past decisions. And so when you can't have confidence in your own decisions that you're going to choose something that's right for you, that causes a lot of tension. And then the third piece kind of builds on the first two. So if you're not clear and confident, there is no way that you can communicate effectively to other people, whether that's a manager, whether that's a colleague, whether that's an interview. So you need to get clear and confident for yourself so that you can then convey that to other people. Now I put all of my kind of findings together in a 3-part audio series that's called The 3 Things You're Missing in Your Career That Are Leaving You Feeling Stuck, Aimless, and Dissatisfied. It's about an hour of content just talking through all of the ways and all of the mistakes that you might be making in order to feel this way. So if that's helpful for you or anyone that you know, please share that widely. All right, so today, when designing a career that fits, we're going to go through a couple of steps. So first, we're going to relieve some of the pressure that you put on your job. The second is we're going to really start to assess and understand what works for you. How are things going currently? What's important to you, and how does work fit into that? And then we're going to talk about taking action. So we'll talk a little bit about either molding your current role to be an even better fit, or how to think about finding new opportunities. And then I also want to touch on decision making, because this is something that we get a little bit trapped by, of feeling like we don't want to make the wrong decision and we have to make the right decision. So I'm going to give you a couple of new frameworks to think about how to make decisions in your career. So I would love for you to raise your hand, and I know I can't see you, but you can either raise your hand in Zoom or just raise your hand wherever you are. Who here has felt any sort of career pressure in their life? So I'm going to make a bold assumption that every single person is raising their hand, because I've been doing this workshop for years and every person raises their hand. So it's something that I want to talk more about, because everybody is having this experience, but we don't necessarily talk about it that much. So here are a couple of flavors of career pressure that I see in my work with clients. So first is this, they always knew, right? The second is a really great concept that comes from a book called Roadmap. And they define the noise as anything that comes at you that doesn't take your individual personality into account. So this can come from your family, right? You absolutely should be a doctor, you absolutely shouldn't be a doctor. It can come from society. There's so much pressure about what we should want to do and what work should mean to us. And it can even come from our own self-doubt. You know, I'm never good enough to be an XYZ, I won't even try. Then there's also the self-inflicted, and this one is tricky because it's a little, sneaky, but also it's great because it's coming from us and we can work to release that. So this can look like perfectionism, the hours we show up to work, the tasks we take on. So often we have really high expectations for ourselves. And then the final one is passion. Now, it's not that I'm against you having passion in your job. And at the same time, I find that the way that we talk about passion today can sometimes create this immense pressure of, you probably only have one passion and you should probably know it by now, otherwise you're doing it wrong, and it should probably be in your work. And that works for some people, And it doesn't work for a lot of people. So I want people to be able to find out, where does passion make sense for you? If it's in your job, great. If it's going to be outside of your job, that's also okay. I wrote an article saying that it's okay to have a boring job if it works for you. So if you find yourself in that camp, definitely check that out. So also in Roadmap, there's a great story about a young woman who is talking to one of her mentors. And she says, I've always wanted to be a lawyer since I was young, but now I really want to pursue something in music, but I feel like I'm giving up on law school. What is giving up, and what is choosing to do something else? And I love her mentor's answer. He says, you've created a cell for yourself. You've shared with everyone that this is what you're going to do, and now you're trying to live up to the expectations that you've created for everybody else. You created that cell. The good news is that you have the key and can say, you know what? I changed my mind. So I want you to give yourself the grace and the freedom and the flexibility. Even if you've been saying that this is what you want for a while, you get to change your mind. And while we're at it, let's get rid of the noise that there's an expectation that you have it figured out by 20 and that's who you are for your whole life. Reevaluate how much you're allowed to change who you are throughout life and at what age you're supposed to have it figured out. You're allowed to have multiple identities over your life. You can decide that you're going to do something else, be someone else at 40, 50, 60, 70. May that never end for you. I would challenge us to think about it not as somewhere where we're trying to get to where we have it figured out. What if our career and our life is about serendipity, learning and growing, new opportunities, discovering new things? That's what I would love to see as the way that we think about career. So I want you to take just a moment to start to identify what the pressure is that you might see. You know, everybody has different pressure in different parts of the world, different cultures. So think about 3 little prompts here. The voices around me are saying, I should be a this, I have to that, my career has to. And then think briefly about these 2 questions. What impact does the pressure have on you? And what would be possible if you could relieve that pressure? So I'm going to give you just a minute or 2 here to really think about what are those pressures for yourself so that we can start to separate them from what actually works for you. So take a couple of minutes there. As you're working on that, I want to share one client story about pressure. So I worked with somebody last year who said that she has had a lifelong dream of working in visual design for video games. And it's something that when she was in high school, when she was growing up, going to college, her parents said that that was not an appropriate career path for her to take. And so she ended up getting an engineering degree, and she'd been working in project management for several years. And so when we discovered this lifelong dream and kind of brought it back to the front, she discovered that actually it was a really great fit for the values in her life, for her strengths. And so she started making small changes towards it. She put together a portfolio. She started working with somebody on Patreon. She started looking into what opportunities there were to learn more about visual design for video games. And about a year later, after we worked together, she reached out and said, Lindsay, I cannot even believe this, but I have signed up for a 2-year MFA, and I'm working towards being able to switch my career into visual design. And it was just this moment where she said, I've never felt more proud of myself, and I really never thought that I would do this. So that's one example of being able to really see where are the pressures that have told you what you can and cannot do so far? How does that work for you? And is there a way for you to choose differently once you're aware of those pressures? So keep thinking about those. Keep looking for any external pressure that is not taking into account the things that actually work for you. All right, next we are going to jump into doing 2 exercises to really assess how are things going currently and what actually works for you. And the reason that we do this is that, when people ask us, how are things going at work? How do you like your job? That can be such a daunting question. We don't really know how to answer it. Sometimes we do get really hyper-focused on the downsides of a job, or alternatively, we put a Band-Aid on something that is really not a good fit. So I want to give you 2 exercises and frameworks to help think about how are things going currently. So what I'm going to have you do is draw this circle and split it into 8 pieces and label it with these pieces of different aspects of career. What we're going to do is we're going to assess our satisfaction in each of these areas on a scale from 0 to 10. So take just a moment and draw the circle, split it into the 8 pieces, and label it with these attributes. Now, if you find that some of them don't resonate with you, that's okay. Feel free to make your own too. If you want to think about your fulfillment in working cross-functionally or your own time management, slot in the words that make sense for you. But this is my suggestion of where to start. So take just a couple of moments there. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go around the circle, and for each of these pieces, we're going to ask ourselves, how fulfilled am I in this area on a scale from 0, which is not at all fulfilled, to 10, which is pretty darn fulfilled. And I'm going to ask you to go around the circle pretty quickly. I'm not going to give you a lot of time, because if there's one thing we are great at, it is overthinking our answers. So I'm going to help you not do that, but what we're going to do is go around the circle, think about the number for each segment, and just jot down, okay, generating results, I feel like that's a 2 out of 10. Creative self-expression, do I really get to show my creativity and who I am at work? Let's say 4 out of 10. Career development, 6 out of 10. And just do a quick gut feel around the circle. Now, balance is going to look different to everybody, so it's not that we're going for all 10s, but I want you to just ask your intuition what these numbers look like, and then we'll think about how to implement that. So go around the circle. Again, really quick here. I'm not going to give you a lot of time. And if you have extra time, you can jot down any of the reasons that you put these numbers, but just go around and draw this visual representation of how things are feeling. Okay, so I'm going to stop you there. Again, not going to give you too much time. Now, here is a visual representation of how things are feeling in this moment. And you may be feeling one of 3 ways. So you might be feeling that it's really worse than you expected. Like, these numbers are pretty low. Oh, I probably need to do something and take some action here. And that's okay. There's no good or bad answer to this exercise, but it gives you information and it surfaces any of the things that you're feeling that you may not have realized. Another way you can be feeling is, this is actually a little bit better than expected. There are some pretty high numbers on this exercise. That's kind of interesting and makes me think a little bit differently about my fulfillment in my role. Or you might be feeling like, yep, that's pretty much what I expect. That is a visual representation of how I'm feeling at the moment. And I worked with a client a couple months ago who came to me and was, I need to quit my job. I'm probably done with this company. I may even be done with the field. Like, I'm just over it. And we got to this exercise in the process that I take people through. And she kind of laughed and she was like, actually, there are a lot of good things about my job. It's actually good in a lot of ways. And if I made these two changes, then I'm going to feel really fulfilled in this role. So whatever your reaction is great. It is information for you to figure out, what do you want to do with that? So the way that we think about implementing this exercise is I want you to look at any of the scores that are lower than you would like and to think about what actions could you take that would increase that score by 0.5. So we are not trying to get everything to a 10. We're not trying to fix everything all at once and overwhelm ourselves. We're actually looking for the smallest ways to make a difference. So let me give you some examples from past clients. So one woman realized that her relationship score was lower than she liked. And then she realized that, hold on, I am eating lunch away from my desk every day. And that is really not creating the relationships that I want to have at work. Another client really wanted to work on his communication skills. So he looked at preparing an agenda for each of his one-on-ones so that he felt he was being more clear and communicating effectively and more prepared. You can take time to celebrate your own successes. If you want to work on your recognition, you can block off strategy time each week. If you want to think about increasing your generating results score. And then we'll also talk a little bit later on about a framework for a conversation with your manager, because this can be a really great outcome of these exercises. Manager, here's what I learned. Here are the changes that I want to make, and I would love for you to support me in these particular ways. So just think for a moment and see if there are any 0.5 actions that stand out to you that would make a difference in any of the areas that are low scores. All right, so jot down just a couple of there. If anyone feels like sharing them in the chat, or if you want to get ideas from other people, feel free to do that. And then we're going to go on to our second exercise. So this is about understanding what your values are and how work fits into that. So I want you to make 2 columns on your paper. And in the left-hand column, I want you to make a list of maybe 5 to 7 life decisions that you have made so far. Anything that feels important to you. So that might be choosing which college to go to, choosing not to go to college, moving to a city, deciding to take or leave a job, doing a year abroad, getting married or not getting married, whatever the decisions feel like that are important to you in your life. And I will say that I worked with somebody who was like, oh my gosh, I know the first decision that felt life-changing to me was in the 8th grade. I was in basketball and I was in debate, and their final activities were on the same day, and I ended up choosing debate, and it really defined who I am. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad that we have these strong feelings about this action in 8th grade. So for some of you, maybe this decision list starts in 8th grade. For others, maybe we don't even remember really what was going on in 8th grade. But go ahead and make a list of the things that feel like they have been meaningful to you. Now, you may already have some information here. Sometimes when I run this workshop, people say, you know, I haven't really had the opportunity to make a lot of active choices. A lot of things have been made for me, either by family or circumstances. So again, just use all of this as information. This is not meant to help you beat yourself up, which you're already probably very good at. We all are. But it's really about, you know, bringing the awareness to what has happened and then being able to potentially choose differently going forward. All right, for anybody who is ready for the next step, in the right-hand column, I want you to list the motivations behind each of those decisions. So what was going through your head in that moment? What made you choose the thing that you chose? What were you trying to get more of? What were you trying to move away from? So, you know, some examples might be that you weren't feeling challenged in a particular situation, that you were looking for some adventure in your life, or maybe some stability. You wanted to be closer to your community or to your family, and maybe the situation you were in was costing you your health. So really think about the reasons and motivations behind each of these decisions, and take just a moment to jot those down. And then what you're going to start to do is circle the things that look like they might be values. So in my example, challenge, adventure, community, health. It might also look like independence, self-worth, financial stability, growth. To really start to look at what are the values that pop up from how you have actually lived your life. And then once you have that list, I want you to think about a couple of questions. So one is, what is your definition of each of your values? Because some of them might be words that we throw around a lot in the realm of life and career. So something like growth. What does growth mean to you? Because it's probably going to mean something very different to every single person on this call. So really think about, how do you define each of your values so that you can know how to look for that specific thing. The second thing I want you to think about is, which of these values do you want honored in a work sense, and which of them would be fine being honored in the rest of life. So for example, something like growth. Some people absolutely feel like they need growth in their work. Otherwise they feel like they're bored, they're stagnating. And other people say, you know what, if I can have the time and mental energy to be able to do 10 out of 10 growth in my life outside of work, that feels good to me. I have people who are taking Russian language classes. I have people who are writing novels, and that works for them. So really think about what arena of your life is going to be important to you to prioritize each of these values. And then the final question that always comes up is, what if their intention? And so the most common example that shows up is the tension of stability and adventure. So if you have two values that seem like their intention, you can think about it in two ways. So the first way is this split of work or life. You know, maybe if you have a really adventurous work life right now, there's a lot of risk, it's fun, it's exciting. Maybe you want a lot more stability in your life outside of work, or vice versa. The other way to think about it is, maybe it's a pendulum that swings back and forth. So I had a workshop participant who said, every 2 years I get itchy and I want to swing between this adventure and this stability. And my answer was, that is great that you know the time frame of it. Then we can actually design that into the process, and it's never a surprise when it shows up. So think about, you know, do you have a cadence of when it swings back and forth? And is that a way that you can design that into the process? And then I want you to continue to learn about yourself in different ways, because the more you know about yourself, the more you can communicate with others and get into places that are going to be a really good fit for you. So some ways that you could do that are to learn more about your strengths. Think about what activities do you enjoy doing day to day, and on the flip side, what drains your energy? Then what do you need out of an environment to thrive? What do you need about the people, about the mission of the company, about your physical environment? And then what do you want to be known for? I had this incredible colleague share that she asks women business owners this question of, what is your 500-year legacy? And that is a huge question to ponder, but I like this idea of, what is your legacy? What do you want to be known for? And how do you think about that in the context of your everyday role and what you're learning about? So now we're going to talk a little bit about taking action. And there's a really great book called Designing Your Life, which you should absolutely read if you have not yet. Lots of great exercises and ways to think about framing your life. They sum up their entire book on how to design your life into 3 pieces. Get curious, talk to people, and try stuff. So I love this super easy framework, very simple. If I wanted to get into action, I can probably find something to do in one of these 3 categories. So get curious. What have you always been curious about? What maybe has been on your list that wasn't an approved thing for you to do when you were growing up? Talk to people. Who do you have around you? I had a client who was like, I have always thought about having a food truck. It's like, great. Who do you know in your network who has done that? Or who do you know who knows somebody who has a food truck? Start talking to people and getting more information about what that looks like. And then third, try stuff. I am a risk-averse person, and I never want clients to do anything that feels risky for them either. And so I always talk to them about, how do you test things out? How do you run prototypes? How do you test something out in the smallest way possible? So I want to share one example from my own experience. And I know this is pretty rude to put up here, especially if it's near meal times for anyone, but I won't let it linger for too long. So I mentioned that I take professional baking classes. So because I'm an engineer, baking to me seems like just engineering with food. I love it. I love executing the hard recipes. I love learning about the science of things. And when you love something and you do it as a hobby, what does everyone tell you? You should do this as your job. You should open a bakery. You should be a baker. And so I'd heard that enough times that after I left Google, I was like, okay, how do I test this out in the smallest way possible? And I found that the San Francisco Baking Institute runs 5-day courses for professional bakers, but they also let amateur bakers join. And so I went and did 5 days. I baked from like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day for 5 days. Got my sweet baking jacket. Like, it was legit and awesome. Had the best time ever. And then at the end of those 5 days, I said, okay, let me be clear about what was really interesting to me. And I identified 3 things. So one was the challenge. All of these things were so complicated. I had never done them before. I don't have the ingredients for these things in my house. And so there was a huge level of challenge, which was really motivating. The second was learning. I love learning. I'm one of the most curious people I know. And every morning we would have a lecture about why you should use butter instead of margarine in your croissants, why you use a different kind of crust for the bottom of an apple pie than the top of an apple pie. And the third was variety. So we were probably making like 5 different things a day, which was so awesome and really exciting and stimulating. So those were the 3 things that I loved out of this 5-day experience. And then I thought about, which of those would I get if I turned it into a full-time job? And it was really interesting because I think that none of those would show up. Right? The challenge would dissipate over time because I would have experience. You don't want a baker who's making the things for the first time every day. That doesn't seem like a good business model. And then second, I'm pretty sure there's no lecture every morning in a bakery. And then we really wouldn't get to make the same amount of variety, because in a bakery, you're expected to make the same things every day. Your customers are gonna expect the same things. And so in that moment, I was able to give a really clear answer to myself of, actually, for right now, this works for me as a hobby and not as a full-time job. And I will give myself the ability to change my mind at some point in the future if it becomes different. You know, if I want to design an experience of being a baker in a way that really fulfills those three things. So I just want to share that example of how to think about, you know, taking action in the smallest way that will give you a lot of information. So some questions that you can ask yourself are, what are you curious about? Who would you love to learn from? And what would you like to try? Is there anything that really stands out? And then we talked about this manager conversation framework. So here's a way that you could share what you're learning from these two exercises with your manager. You know, here's how I learned about how things are going currently from the wheel exercise. And here are the things that are awesome. Here are the areas where I'd like to grow. Here's what I learned about the values exercise and what's important to me and what I really need prioritized in a work sense. And then you could make some asks of your manager. I'd love for you to look out for opportunities for me in these particular areas. I'd love to talk about how I might be able to get better and how you can help hold me accountable to these changes that I want to make. And then you could also offer that you do the same exercise with her and have her let you know what's important to her and how do you also support her as your manager, and, you know, have a really great conversation about both of you designing a career that fits over time. Now, I mentioned we're going to talk about decision making, because oftentimes we get into this trap of what is the right decision, what is the wrong decision, and want to give you two new ways to think about that. So there's a great article in the Harvard Business Review called "Stop Worrying About Making the Right Decision." And I loved it already from its title. The author quotes Scott McNealy, who's a co-founder of Sun Microsystems and its CEO for 22 years. And he says, "It's important to make good decisions, but I spend much less time and energy worrying about making the right decision and much more time and energy ensuring that any decision I make turns out right." And the author says we're understandably anxious and focused on identifying the best option because we feel this risk of being wrong. And so we overemphasize the moment of choice. Oh my gosh, do I take this job? Do I not take this job? Do I move to this place? Do I move to this other place? And then when we do that, we lose sight of everything that follows. So what we should do is to focus on the effort that will be required after we make a decision, as that restores our sense of agency and reminds us that, sure, randomness plays a role in every outcome, but actually our control is going to be in our day-to-day activities more than in our one-time decisions. So make the decision and then focus on what are you going to need to do in the days and weeks and months after you make that decision in order to make sure that that was a great decision for you. So I love this slight change of there's actually no right answer, there's no wrong answer. Really focus on what is going to be required afterwards and make sure you feel like you have the agency and the control there. There's also a really fantastic professor and philosopher. Her name is Ruth Chang, and she studies hard decisions. And she says hard decisions are hard because there's no right answer. In a hard choice, one alternative is better for one way, and the other alternative is better in other ways. So there's no best choice, and neither is really better than the other one overall. And she says that oftentimes we think that hard decisions are these huge monumental decisions we make in our life, but actually we're facing hard decisions all day, every day. And the example that she gives is high fiber cereal or a chocolate donut for breakfast. One of them is clearly more delicious, and one of them is clearly healthier. So she views this as a hard decision. Neither is better overall. Now, when she talks about career, she gives the example of, okay, we've gone through all the options, we've thought it through, we're down to the two options of lumberjack or accountant. And what she suggests is that we turn inwards and ask ourselves, what can I commit to? Thinking about the life of a lumberjack, is that something that I can commit to? Thinking about the life of an accountant, is that something that I can commit to? And you basically create these reasons for yourself. And once you do that, you actually put a value on that option. When you decide, yeah, this is who I am, absolutely, I'm an accountant. And you now have this reason to pursue this option that you didn't have before. So I find it so fascinating that in both of these examples, there's some aspect of creating reasons for yourself. There's some story to tell yourself about why I can commit, why this choice is the right thing for me. Then you get to commit and then live into it, live into those days and weeks and months after you make that decision. And of course, it's going to be the right decision for you when you put that intention and thought and care and agency into it. So I hope that gives you a slightly different way of thinking about how to make decisions and helps you not get trapped in this idea of like, oh, the right decision, the wrong decision. I hope I want to make the right one. So let's take a moment to just jot down any ideas that you've had so far about what actions you may want to take from any of these exercises. So what action can you take to increase a fulfillment score by 0.5? And then two other kind of frameworks I like are, what is one action that you can take tomorrow? What does that make you think of? And what is one action that you can take next week? So I'll give you just a moment there before we wrap up and go to questions. Just write down any actions that you have thought of that would make a difference for you in starting to mold your role to be an even better fit or to cultivate new opportunities in this long-term desire of designing a career that fits for you. All right, so to start wrapping up, this is basically the formula of designing a career that fits, and you keep doing it over and over and over again. So keep acknowledging the pressure that you feel that doesn't fit into your individual personality and what actually works for you. The more that you can separate that, the more you will be able to discover what your own desires are and your own needs and be able to act on those. Second, keep understanding what works for you. The more you know about yourself, the more you can communicate it to others, the more you can be on the lookout for things that are going to be a good fit. Third, take action. Always be taking action. So get curious, talk to people, try things out, go and experiment, run prototypes, and just keep on doing that for the rest of your career. So if there are three things that I really want you to walk away with from today, one is be aware of those pressures that exist. Sometimes we forget to separate them out, and then they can start running the show. Second is discover your needs and honor them when making career decisions. I talk to so many people who are doing things based on what their parents have decided, what society tells us that we should want to do for work. So really get in the habit of discovering your own needs and then get into action mode. I'll keep saying it over and over again, give yourself the opportunity to grow and learn and fall into things and find serendipity and give yourself the freedom to change your mind, and all of that, and really have fun with your career and focus less on doing the right thing. I love this quote from Designing Your Life. When you remember that you are always playing the infinite game of becoming more and more yourself and designing how to express the amazingness of you into the world, you can't fail. So instead of getting overwhelmed by not having a plan, not knowing what's going to happen in the next 10 years, what would it look like for us to approach each and every day of playing the game of becoming more and more ourselves in all of the little ways that we can find? So I do want to mention that I am on this mission to get people feeling less anxious and worried about their career, and as Sam said in the beginning, of being able to do the things that are right for you. So if you know anyone who is aimless or dissatisfied with where they are, unclear what they want to do, they have no plan or strategy for what to do in their career, they're not even confident they're marketable, or they don't know what to look for in new opportunities, I would love to have them reach out. Or if that's you, I would love for you to reach out so I can get you connected to the right resources and we can chat about ways to get you out of that situation. Also, if you are a leader, if you're a manager, if you want to bring this to your company, I also work with companies to help employees feel really good about where they are and get clear, confident, and communicating effectively. So if you're struggling with regretted attrition, if you're trying to ask your employees, well, what do you want to do? How do I help you get into the right place? Or if you're not being given a chance to help your employees find the right fit in your company before they leave, also reach out to me. I would love to connect with anybody that is struggling in this area because I really want to make it so that nobody has to feel this way. So absolutely feel free to reach out. This is one of the best ways. I'll also share my email address. So I hope you can tell I absolutely love talking about career. I have book recommendations. I have lots of free exercises. I'm happy to get you connected to the right resources. So absolutely reach out. Also, if you want to share what you learned from the exercises from today, any epiphanies you had, any questions that you had, always feel free to reach out. So with that, I am happy to take questions for the last 11 minutes.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. That was a really great presentation. Just a reminder to everybody, feel free to leave questions in the Q&A. You can leave them as yourself or anonymously. I did see a question come through already. Lindsay, in a nutshell, how would you recommend that job seekers maintain levels of inspiration whilst going through the arduous process of job hunting?
Yeah, great question. One answer is I will share my favorite resource in the world for job hunting, which is a book called The 2-Hour Job Search. And it is the most practical and structured resource that I have seen that talks about how to approach the job search of today, which is relationship-based. Right? They talk about how we love to submit our resume online, but really that goes into the abyss and it's one of the least effective ways to get a job, but we still kind of do it because it makes us feel like we're doing something productive. But one of their initial exercises is to make a list of 40 companies that you might be interested in working for, and then thinking about how do you connect to people that are at those particular companies. So anyway, check out that resource. And then the other way that I would think about it is there's a very standard way that we think about the job search that is usually really painful. And I would start to think about, based on your particular values, how might you design the job search to be more in line with those values and maybe give you some energy? So do you know that, people are one of the most important things to you? Maybe connection is one of your values. how can you design the job search around, okay, I'm going to have a purpose of connection, and I'm going to speak to a bunch of people about what they find interesting in their career and use that to give me energy, but also give me information about my own job search. So play with the way that you design your job search so that hopefully it's giving you some energy rather than just kind of doing it the way that we always think about for the job search.
Yeah, and Anna here asked the question. She says, I'm unemployed. What are some exercises I can do to help me zero down on what kind of work I really want to do? I'm interested in being a creative producer or working inside film.
Yeah.
And I just think referencing that 40 company list is a great start. But any other tips you have for Anna?
Yeah, there's some other great resources. So Designing Your Life absolutely has some good resources and exercises. One that I really like is tracking your energy for 2 weeks and looking at what activities give you energy and what activities drain your energy, and how can you think about how to incorporate that into the work that you want to do. There's also the classic book, What Color is Your Parachute, that also has a lot of great exercises. So those are probably 3 resources that I would suggest for that.
Great. We've had 2 questions now come in, one from Kathy and one from an anonymous attendee that are pretty similar, but they asked, how do you recommend making a change for a person who has on the golden handcuffs? I love that. I've never heard that before. But essentially somebody who's making a lot of money where they currently are.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most important things about this is that there is no right answer, right? You can actively choose that in this moment, actually financial stability is the most important thing to you. And so you choose this trade-off. You may also find that it doesn't work for you. So that's why I love the values exercise. And you can always go back and kind of do that one more in depth. But for your particular list of values, I want you to then think about, what are my top values and how does this golden handcuffs job, which is something that I personally am very familiar with, given my time at Google. How does that align with my values? So I'll give you one example. I had a client who was working a very high-paying lawyer job that she found pretty boring. And she was like, honestly, I'm underutilized. I am not challenged at all, but I get this awesome paycheck. And all of my friends are telling me, like, you should definitely find a new job. You're being underutilized. Oh my gosh, like, you're intelligent and great, and they're not using you. So she was having all this turmoil. We went through the values exercise, and her number one deal breaker, non-negotiable, was financial stability for her family. She had a young son at the time. And so she saw that, oh my gosh, actually, the fact that I am being underutilized and under-challenged at work really works for me, because then I have extra time and energy to be able to spend with my son while I am also providing incredible financial stability for the family. And so she was able to say with complete confidence, yes, this is the right job for me right now. And it actually doesn't matter to me what everybody else says I should be doing. So look at the job that you have, look at how it aligns with your values, and then make a decision based on that feels good to you. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, even though I know that society has a lot of thoughts about golden handcuff jobs and what all of that means.
Okay, cool. We have a bit of a long one, but I think the overall topic is going to resonate with a lot of audience members, so I want to ask it. This anonymous attendee said, I picked a college major that I wanted to do rather than one I should have done because it would have benefited me more financially. I did what I believed in for almost 7 years, but there was no pay and I was completely burnt out. At this point, all I want is something I don't hate that compensates me appropriately. But because I started my career shortly before the financial crisis, I've always been underpaid because underpaid was better than unemployed rather.
Yeah.
How do you recommend responding to previous salary questions in employment applications or interviews so you don't undervalue yourself? And I think just the topic of not being undervalued if you currently are in a situation where you are, and how do you move forward and get out of that, is a really great question to address.
Yeah, I'm sure so many of us experience this. The first thing that I would say is that give yourself a lot of compassion as step number one. You know, we beat ourselves up about these decisions that we've made, about the circumstances we were in. So step number one is always more compassion about where you have been. Know that you are doing the best that you could in any situation. Second, I'm reading a book called Range, which talks about how, you know, specialists are so like held up to really high regard in our society, but actually what makes the most difference is to have a range of experiences. So don't worry that you did something else for many years that you are not going to go forward with, or you chose a major that you're not doing now. Everything that you have done is giving you experiences and information, and probably that will play into what your unique value is. So I always want to tell people who have a background that feels like, oh, it's jumpy or it doesn't make any sense. Actually, that is where your unique value is going to be. So that's another thought. And then third, I don't know specifically about the employment question. I know it's different for different states. Like I think in California, you're not allowed to ask that anymore.
It is illegal in a few states. You're correct. Okay. So don't give a number.
Yeah. So, you know, check on your state's laws for that.
Yes.
But the thing that I would say, kind of this idea of being, you know, underutilized and undervalued, goes back to the thing that I've been saying a lot of the more you are clear and confident about your own value, about what you bring to anything, the more that you can communicate that. So I have people who are getting $15K more in starting salaries than they ever thought possible, because they go into the interview saying, this is what's important to me, here are the strengths that I have, here are the ways where I'm at my best, here's the way that connects to what this role is. And that level of communicating effectively about what you're worth turns into dollars. So, and that can be, you know, if you're looking for a new job, but if you're going for a promotion, if you're talking to your manager about getting a raise, the more clear and confident you are, the better you will be able to convey your value.
Yeah. I mean, Lindsay hit it right on the head there. If you're going into a new job, trying to find a job, and we could talk about salary all day, but if you're going into a new job and they ask you what your previous salary was, A, that's illegal in a lot of states, yep. And B, don't give a number. Talk about where you're going, not where you came from. You know, you have all of your skills that qualify you for X position. What's the salary that you want at X position? What is, you know, industry average, all of that great stuff. But yeah, I mean, it looks like we are right out of time. I see a few more questions. We will be including some contact information for Lindsay in the follow-up email. So if you have a question and you want to contact her, feel free to do so. But thank you so much, Lindsay. This was a really great presentation.
This was a pleasure. Really, please do reach out with any questions, any thoughts, any ways that I can support you. I am so committed to you feeling good about your job and in a good place. So please reach out. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We will catch you at the next one. Bye.
See ya.